Morjens and welcome to Finnish Black Metal Time. Technically speaking, US American as well as Finnish. Let's get our heads out of our asses and talk about the Finnish way. Ævangelist or Evangelist. And this is a curious case because it's technically a band that is being disputed. Let's get into that in a bit, but first let's take a look at this beautiful A5 size digibook release called Perdition Ekstasis Meta, which comes with a nice cover. I don't know if it's just me, but if I was seeing this in a store, I would be thinking this must be some artistic sci-fi movie. Everything from the cover to the name. Yeah, it's gotta be some sci-fi. Maybe some, very, very artistic, weird, and all that stuff. Marginal, nonetheless. Voidhanger Records release came already out in 2024, but a little bit late to the party here for a couple of reasons. First of all, the label hasn't been sending me anything for I don't know how many years. Maybe they found the whole channel boring, useless, whatnot, waste of money maybe. But the band itself offered me this copy. Thank you to the main man of the band for this possibility to talk about this release and show it to you, because especially these kind of special or limited edition ones are always very, very fascinating to me. A man of physical products when it comes to music, not so much when it comes to movies, video games, TV series and so forth. But music is the passion that drives this channel, as you probably know, so it's a pleasure to talk about these kind of releases. And here you have the current lineup, vocals and the other guy. Now, what does that mean? This needs to be explained before we get into the music. Now, first of all, let's do a little bit of backtrack first and go to this main page of when you type Ævangelist. Here on Metal Archive site, you can see two bands, one from United States called Black Death Metal and one from Finland being experimental Black Death Metal. And when you just go for this Finnish one, which this technically speaking is, you will see that from 2010 to 2018 there was this other Ævangelist, which was an American band. And here is the story that this whole band thing got a little bit in dispute because two members didn't really agree upon what's the story with the band. Now, Matron Thorn relocated to Finland and decided to continue this band despite what the other people or other person was saying. I think it's the right call, but what do I know? I don't know the full story and so forth. But basically, this is in a way an American way of, doing Batushka story, as you probably remember. That came a little bit later, but similar in the sense that the original members didn't really agree where or which direction the band should be going on, should they go on with the original name and all that stuff. Now, these are old news obviously because 2018 and onwards this Finnish version of Ævangelist has been going on and put out quite a few albums. And as such, it totally deserves to be credited and mentioned in its own phenomenon. So, 2018 and onwards, the band has been putting out now 5 different albums, as well as some, other releases, including EPs and compilation, demo, whatnot. But we're not here talking about the full discography, but focusing on the Perdition Ekstasis Meta, which is 75 minutes and more of music. Now here it says something different, but at least my CD player claimed it's 75 minutes. Be that may, nobody gives a shit about few seconds here and there when we're talking about this kind of a massive album. To be honest, it's a little bit too much. It's not so that there are too many songs, it's more like the song lengths are sometimes too much, which you can probably see when there are tracks like 15 minutes, well, almost with the Ekstasis Divine. Anyhow, what it's musically, when we're tackling this musically, is what we are talking about really experimental black death metal. Now, let's be honest about it. Musically, we could say death metal isn't exactly the keyword you're looking for when we're talking about Ævangelist. Sure, certain parts are kind of like remind you of death metal, but can we really talk about experimental black metal or black death metal when we're talking about this particular album? And I would say nope. Death metal might be some kind of a seasoning or more kind of a legacy thing with this band, but it's definitely not defining this so much as music. But what is true, however, is that this is quite a bit of experimental black metal. Now, some of the ideas obviously don't sound or resonate with black metal at all. There are lots of parts where it just gets like a little bit progressive or experimental. This is very much like where you draw the line between progressive, experimental, or some, crossover thing. For me, it's never been that easy. I mean, there are certain bands which are definitely more avant-garde-ish. Some are more experimental, but oftentimes it's almost like just using different words to describe the same stuff. Doesn't matter which way you want to go. This is not your typical black metal either. First of all, a lot of these songs don't really go with the typical, formula. Like, okay, you have these and these riffs, and then you have this and this kind of pattern with drums, guitars, bass, vocals, etc. This is more like sometimes the band goes totally off-road. And that's not like I'm complaining, I'm just trying to describe what the music is doing. And secondarily, there are no real drums, which already puts this in a little bit of a different box called electronic music. Now, the drum machine ain't bad if you consider this more like electronic music, but if you start considering more so as a metal release, you might feel the drum machine is bad, or at least at best tolerable. I'm saying this as a drum porno fan, meaning I really love some old school thrash metal drumming, which is fierce and sometimes technical. I do love a lot of death metal drumming, technical or boneheaded stuff, because there is this punch, there is this energy, this is this creativity, which pretty much all the times is missing out from these kind of programmed drums. More so, it's about like programmed drums sound shitty when it comes to the samples being used, as well as really get that dynamic human factor playing the drums. But there are exceptions where programmed drums are quite good. Unfortunately, this is not the one. Now, if you can go past beyond that point where drums are being concerned and talked about, you will find a rather interesting trip to some kind of experimental music, which is, like I said, related to black metal, but not exactly defining black metal, or more like black metal isn't really defining the whole album, what we have here in question. There are lots of interesting parts, even good riffs where like, wow, this is getting somewhere, and then it gets more into this kind of flow state of thing where it falls more on the background as music. And now for some people that's totally a curse. Some people hate the idea of being background music. But let's be honest about it, the world is filled with that. Whether you go to forest and you hear, birds chirping or whatever, singing, it's actually background ambience. Or when you hear wind chimes when it's outside this very building, because I like the sound, and while it's not your typical way of describing music, it is exactly like that. Wind playing the music instead of human factor. My point here is there are lots of things, including music like dark ambient, which isn't seen, the typical thing what happens in rock or metal music. Sometimes it's just bad, and sometimes it's very, very fascinating. And that's, in my opinion, what Ævangelist is doing right. It's kind of a waving the middle finger to typical metal things and saying, like, we're going to do something else, and if you don't like it, go away. And at the same time, I feel like this could be even better. Maybe it's more like the 75 minutes with these overextending tracks. It's just like, it could be a little bit more focused and more compact. But would it lose the very soul in the process of doing that? I do not know, obviously, because I don't have the sweetened version of this very album. But this is a hard cookie for me to crack, because at the same time I like some ideas quite a bit, and a lot of ideas which I find a little bit boring. I'm saying little bit because I don't hate this album. I'm not obviously disliking it. I'm just saying I have a hard time getting into the very mindset what this album seems to require for you to just like, wow, figure it out. Maybe I'm not figuring out, or maybe I'm just too, old school, too boneheaded, too wary, whatever, as an individual to understand fully this kind of stuff. So for me, it's a little bit like hit and miss. That is not to say it's not a good album. It's just this hard cookie. For some, it's gonna be wow moment, and for some, gonna be saying, yeah, it's pretty interesting, but not right up my alley. And all that stuff. You could probably have a variety of different opinions and takes on the very album, and some might praise it, some might call it shit, and a lot of people will be between these two extremities. Now, my point with this description of sorts, maybe not so much your typical review, is to say Perdition Ekstasis Meta is not your typical album. It's an interesting journey, but it's not for everybody. In a way, I feel it's much like substance abuse. You need to understand what you're doing in order to understand what you're supposed to be doing, or just enjoy the ride. So, for people who now got interested in the music, I can only say, give those links a chance, give this music chance, that is, through those links, and maybe you will like it. It's definitely not for everybody, that's pretty much guaranteed at this point, so what can I say is, give it a go or give it not, it's up to you. For those of or more old school style, probably not worthy a go, but those who are ready to open some new doors and go to some, paths that are not too much, being walked upon, maybe you will give this one a go. I don't know, it's up to you, but links are anyway provided in the description box, and if you happen to fancy this album, well, what can I say, these kind of special items are definitely the stuff to consider to put into your record collection. Now, do what you must, and looking forward to your comments. What do you think about this album? What do you think about the band? Let me know, and now, off you go. Bye.